Mr. Steube is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My questions are for Mr. Rumley. Israel has publicly condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine through announcements and votes in international settings. Israel also sought to provide political support and humanitarian relief for the Ukrainians, including allowing over 15,000 Jewish and non-Jewish refugees to enter Israel without alienating Russia. In some instances, Israel officials served as communicators between their Russian and Ukrainian counterparts. Since 2015, Russia's military presence and air defense capabilities in Syria have given it influence over Israel's ability to conduct airstrikes there. Israel has depended on access to Syrian airspace to target Iranian personnel and equipment, especially those related to the transport of munitions or precision weapons technology to Hezbollah and Lebanon. How has Russia repositioned its forces in the Middle East since the start of the Ukrainian conflict?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. We've seen reports that Russia has repositioned its forces in the region, mostly consolidated into air bases, pulling out from sort of different parts of the country, I think further in the east. It's hard to verify these reports as they all are open source, but I think your question is an important one because it gets at Israel's equities in Syria and its relationship with Russia. And I think we can't underscore enough just how much the IL-20 shootdown in 2018 impacted both the Israeli military, but also the Israeli security leadership today. Israel's priority is freedom of action in Syria and maintaining freedom of action in Syria in order to destabilize Iran's activities there, Iran's ability to support its proxies in Lebanon, in Hezbollah. And so I think Israel has to navigate that fine balance with Russia, as Russia has deployed S-300s in support of Bashar al-Assad and S-400s in support of its own premium assets. So it is certainly a fine line, and I think we've seen Israeli policy from the start of Ukraine reflect that.
Currently, 5 countries operate in or maintain military forces in Syria: Russia, Turkey, Iran, Israel, and the United States. The Assad government, backed by Russia and Iran and aligned military forces, controls about 2/3 of Syria's territory, including most of the major cities. Russia's military influence also extends to North Africa. The Syrian regime also helps funnel money back to Russian oligarchs. How have Russian partners like Iran and Assad responded to redeployments in the region?
Thank you, Congressman. Yeah, I think what we're very likely to see is where Russia repositions and withdraws, Iran and its proxies will look to fill that vacuum. I think that's, going back to my remarks, what makes our presence in northeastern Syria all the more important, both to ensure that any withdrawal doesn't create a vacuum that ISIS and its elements can exploit, but also that we could be there to monitor and potentially disrupt Iranian activities to fill that vacuum. And so I think given the strain placed on the Russian forces, it's likely we're going to see a more active Iranian activity in the region.
Former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a close working relationship with Vladimir Putin, and the two leaders maintained a hotline which allowed the Israeli military to alert Russian forces of incoming strikes in Syria. However, it's clear that even before Russia's war with Ukraine, Putin and Israel's new Prime Minister, Bennett, do not share the same relationship. Russia's assistance to Syrian force in intercepting Israeli missiles in July of 2021 demonstrates this. So how do the security dynamics in Syria impact Israel's approach to Ukraine with respect to Russia?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you, Congressman. I think it's clear that so long as Russia has its air defense systems in Syria in support of Bashar al-Assad, it will maintain some form of leverage over Israel's ability to conduct operations in Syria and strike back at that Iranian infrastructure. I think that I can't speak to the Bennett-Putin relationship, but I do think it's a combination both of navigating that dynamic in Syria, but also him being relatively new. The Putin-Netanyahu relationship had many years to develop, and so I think it was both probably not great timing for Bennett to inherit this crisis, but I think we're going to continue to see Israel navigate a fine line in its relationship with Russia.
I've got a couple of seconds left real quick. What are the risks to Israel's security by supporting Ukraine against the Russian invasion?
Yes, Congressman, there is always the risk that is ever present on Israel's mind that Russia may turn on its air defense systems and begin to attempt to deny Israel freedom of action in Syria.
Thanks for your time here today.
Thank you, Mr. Steube. I will yield myself time for further questioning.